There have been a ton of new people entering the physical precious metals market recently. Maybe you've picked up something that you saw at Costco, or maybe you saw a newspaper article about it, and maybe you've seen one of my videos on precious metals. And in this kind of sphere of investing, this little corner of the internet, we tend to throw around a lot of terms that are very specific to what we do. And one of the terms that is the easiest to understand, but that has so much nuance to it, is Pre-33. So we're going to dive into this and talk about Pre-33. I'm going to explain exactly what it is. I'm going to give you some examples, and also going to give you some tips and ideas if this is something that maybe you think you want to be buying. Pre-33 American gold coins. If you're new to the channel, my name is Dub C. I want to thank you for spending some time with me, especially if you are brand new to this. There are so many different areas that you can kind of dip your toes into, but not everybody has the best information. I'd like to think that I do. So I'm really thrilled that you decided to spend some time with me here today. Hopefully you'll go ahead and click on the subscription button and become part of this community. We have a lot of fun. We get to talk about some really cool things. If you're one of my returning subscribers, thank you guys as always for being with me here. This might be a little bit of a refresher. Maybe I'll hit on some topics that you're not that familiar with yourself, but if nothing else, we get to look at some really cool gold stuff, right? That's never a bad idea. If you are new to the channel, I like to begin my videos with a simple disclaimer. I am not a financial advisor. I'm not trying to offer you any kind of financial advice. I'm simply trying to share some of my experience having bought and sold precious metals and rare coins for the last 30 or 40 years. And then I like to begin my videos with a couple of topics that you can be thinking about while we're talking about the main subject of the video. In this case, we're talking about Pre-33 gold coins. So I'm going to tell you all about Pre-33 gold. And I also want to bounce another idea off of you before we jump into it and start talking about this in a little bit of a deeper level. What is Pre-33? This is interesting. One of my subscribers, Shep Celsus, made a statement on a recent post, and you're looking at a picture of it here, and he says, Pre-33 is a bit of mystery to me. Raw, it always has a bigger premium attached compared to other gold, yet it seems like many dealers regularly include raw Pre-33 in their piles to resell to refiners or wholesalers. So this idea that even those people who are already in this market may not really understand it. Pre-33, I think, is one of the most interesting areas to stack precious metals. What is Pre-33? Starting way back in 1795, the United States of America started producing gold coins. We produce these for circulation. It's a strange concept, especially if you are of a younger generation, but we used to spend gold coins. Now, we probably didn't spend them that often, but they were entirely legal tender. And when it came to buying larger things, like farms or livestock or houses, there wasn't a lot of paper money to go around, and that which was around was not trusted by a lot of people. So gold was always an important commodity, and it was always an important form of coinage for larger transactions, or even to base other paper transactions like loans off of. So from 1795 to 1933, the United States of America made gold coins. What happened in 1933? The United States was deep in depression. The Great Depression was going on. There was not enough money to lend to kind of get the economy going again. We knew that we needed to reinvest in factories and spend a lot of money on infrastructure. And this was all designed to get America moving again. But our currency was tied to gold. So President Roosevelt decided to kind of decouple our paper money, our dollars, from gold. He issued an executive order 6102, which essentially said that no longer could you own gold certificates. That was the paper money that we spent. But also you couldn't own gold bullion. And for a lot of Americans, you weren't supposed to own certain types of gold. This is always kind of one of the things that confuses people, because the actual executive order did allow for a certain amount of gold to continue to be owned by the American public. You could own gold jewelry, you could own gold works of art. If there were really rare coins in a coin collection, you could own those, and the average American could still own up to $100 face value in what was then the circulating gold coin. So this is a $20 gold piece, and it weighs very close to a troy ounce. We'll talk about these weights in just a minute. If this was $20 and every person can own up to $100, you could see that you could still own a lot of gold. There's a lot of misinformation and a lot of misunderstanding about that. But the general idea is that private gold ownership was made much more difficult. Let's put it that way, other than just being straight out outlawed. Some people, especially certain coin dealers, tend to perpetuate the notion that if you are buying gold now, this is the best stuff to buy because it was protected in these confiscations. That's probably not really accurate, and it certainly doesn't have to be accurate in the future. If the government wants to take your gold, they're going to take your gold. It doesn't matter what form it's in. They could always recall anything they wanted to. So I don't really believe in that kind of conspiracy theory idea very much. Gold is gold. If the government wants it, they're going to take it. I don't really feel like there's a reason that the government's going to try to confiscate your gold, go knocking door to door. It wasn't successful in 1933. It would be much less successful in the 2020s. So, pre-33, technically any gold coin made before 1933. But for most stackers, when we talk about pre-33, we are talking about things that don't have a lot of numismatic or coin collector value. So we're not talking about pieces made way back in 1795. We're really talking about pieces that came maybe after the gold rush, which was 1849, 1850, somewhere in there, up until 1933. And we're really talking about three types of coins, three denominations, because the United States of America has made all sorts of gold denominations. You're looking at a $1 gold piece from 1851. The United States also put out $2.50 gold pieces and $3 gold pieces and even $4 gold pieces and so many other styles. So many other denominations, but that's not really what people stack gold in the form of a precious metal in those kind of obscure and very rare pieces. It's not really what we're talking about. For the sake of argument, for the sake of this discussion, we'll really be talking about three denominations. That is the $5 gold piece, the $10 gold piece, and the $20 gold piece. So we're already showing you that you don't have to think about gold all the way back into the 1700s. It's really more from about 1850 to 1933. You don't have to talk about every single denomination. It's really just those three denominations that most stackers concentrate on. So we'll talk about those three individually. There were also two different varieties, and this makes sense because we had been making gold coins for a long time. So starting in about that gold rush period, we had this design that's often called the Liberty design, and you can see her crest of her crown right there. If you can see it right here, it says Liberty on it right there. This was a very similar motif that was used across all of the different coins that we were making from that 1850 period all the way up until about 1907. This is another example. So you can see the larger it gets, really the design is quite similar. So this was the earlier style, the Liberty style. And then about 1907, 1908, we had a great big redesign of our coinage. And while we kept the denominations and the sizes and the weights and the purities, everything else was exactly the same. The design changed. So we went, instead of that Liberty style, we went with what is typically called the Indian style. This is a $2.50 and a $5 design that share this really interesting in-cues design. That means this design is stamped into the surface of the coin rather than being brought up out of it. So the $2.50 gold piece and the $5 gold piece of this era share that same design. It's a beautiful design, the Indian design. The $10 gold piece of this time was another Indian design that was made by Augustus Saint-Gaudens. So you can see that we're continuing this Indian motif. And then the $20 gold piece of this period, it was also designed by Saint-Gaudens, not specifically in Indian, but it is of this later series. So we would probably kind of throw this in with the Indian designs. The Liberty designs a little bit earlier, the Indian designs a little bit later. So now we know that we can talk about pieces that are from a certain period of time, that are a certain denomination, and that are either one of two different styles. So we've already kind of dispelled a lot of the misinformation and misunderstanding about pre-33. It's just the gold coins that circulated from about 1850 to about 1933, and it's really just that $5, $10, and $20 gold piece. That's a pretty good idea, right? Now you already have a pretty good understanding of this. In 1974, in fact, it was December 31st of 1974, then President Gerald Ford signed Public Law 93-373, which once again allowed gold ownership by most Americans. It rescinded most of the restrictions so that all of these pieces and pretty much any other type of gold that you want to put your money into is something that you are allowed to buy in the United States of America. So now we have kind of free reign to buy the pieces we want, and we make good use of that in the United States of America. We put money into all sorts of forms of gold. We'll talk about many of them here as we get further into this. I mentioned that there was another concept that I wanted you to think about, and that is the concept of actual gold weight. Actual gold weight is the amount of pure gold contained within any coin. So many easy-to-use websites will show you just about any coin that you want to that's made of gold, and they will tell you what the actual gold weight is. And that's significant because a lot of gold coins are alloyed with other metals to make them a little bit less pure. In the case of coins like these, this was done because it was a tradition and because these pieces actually did circulate, and circulating coins take a lot of abuse. Gold is quite soft as a metal, so by alloying the gold with a little bit of copper or a little bit of silver or even both, we make these pieces much stronger. They can take a lot more abuse. And because of that, we kind of continue to use a very similar alloy up until the present time. Even though these pieces that we're making now for gold coin ownership don't really circulate, it's still kind of a tradition that we alloy them. Now, some coins are alloyed and some aren't, but that's why the actual gold weight is an important thing to understand. By using a website, and I'll put a couple of them down below, I use NGC's website, that's ngccoin.com, and also the website Numista. They often tell you what the actual gold weight is of every coin so that you can compare coin to coin and not even really worry so much about trying to do the math involved with figuring out what the alloy is, how much copper, how much silver is mixed in with the gold. You can simply look at the actual gold weight. And you're looking at an example of it here. Pretty easy to understand, right? So there are three things essentially that make Pre-33 gold different from modern bullion. They are purity, weight, and then collectability. So we'll talk about all three of those, and then I'll wrap this up at the end with some suggestions if this is something that you want to pursue. Let's start with the purity of gold. Pre-33 American gold coins are always going to be 90% gold. That was the alloy that we used all the way up until 1933 when we did recall the gold coins. Why is that? Again, it was really to make them more durable. Isn't all modern bullion gold 999 fine, 39s fine, or 99.9% pure versus the 90% pure of Pre-33? The answer is no. Not all of it is. Some of it is. And because it doesn't circulate, a lot of the refineries or the countries that put out these pieces have moved to 3/9 fine purity to make it easier to understand. Honestly, it doesn't make that much of a difference, and I'll get back to that a little bit later. If you've ever considered buying, or if you own, the American Gold Eagle, this is America's modern gold bullion coin. This is one of the most popular gold bullion coins on the market. It and its fractions of gold are incredibly popular. Isn't that 3/9 fine? The answer is no. America's Gold Eagles are 91.7% pure. So you might be thinking, well, how can this be a 1-ounce gold coin if it's only 91.7% pure? Well, we make them larger. They weigh more than 1 troy ounce to account for that alloy. But the long and short is that every one of these pieces contain the exact amount of gold, the weight, the purity that they are supposed to in order to be 1 troy ounce, or in the case of these fractional pieces, 1/2, 1/4, and 1/10 of a troy ounce. So the biggest selling gold bullion coin on the market is also not pure gold, just like these Pre-33 pieces are not pure gold. But there are other examples out there. This is a South African Krugerrand. This was the first, arguably the first modern bullion coin. It too is a 1 troy ounce bullion vehicle, and it too is 91.7% pure. So even something as popular as the South African Krugerrand is not pure gold. Did you know that the gold Britannia, which is one of the most popular 3/9 fine gold coins from Europe and from England, and specifically the United Kingdom, was first released in 1987 and was made all the way up until 2013 out of 91.7% pure gold, right? We think of the Britannia as a modern 3/9 fine gold coin, but for 26 years, it also was 91.7% pure. You can see that this is a theme, right? There is a popular gold coin from Mexico called the Libertad. This is a modern gold bullion coin from Mexico, first released in 1981, and it was made out of 90% pure gold for the first 8 or 10 years of its existence, all the way up until 1990. So you can see that some people will argue Pre-33 is not a good idea because it's not a pure gold alloy, but all of these other modern bullion coins either started as an alloyed gold or are still being made out of an alloy to this day, and they remain very popular. So don't let that be a stumbling block for you. If it's really a huge concern, then it's going to be a concern of yours. But the fact of the matter is that things like the American Gold Eagle and the South African Krugerrand are also not pure gold. So we've talked a little bit about purity. How about weights? Well, this one is a little bit trickier. Modern gold bullion pieces tend to be in troy ounces or fractions thereof. We mentioned before that this is an American Gold Eagle. This is one full troy ounce, but then we have a half ounce, a quarter ounce, and a tenth of an ounce. Almost every modern gold bullion coin comes in those fractions. Some of them get even smaller, to a 20th or a 50th of a troy ounce. But the main ones are the full ounce, the half ounce, the quarter ounce, and the 1/10 of a troy ounce. Pre-33 does not make use of those really easy to understand fractions of a troy ounce. But if you're talking about trying to figure out how much your gold is worth and you have a half ounce or a quarter ounce or a tenth of a troy ounce, you're already going to have to use some form of math, whether it's in your head or on a calculator, to figure out how much gold you have, because the price of gold is generally given in full troy ounces. So if you already have to figure out what a quarter of a troy ounce is, you're already probably using a calculator. The same holds true with Pre-33. While the pieces that we talk about most often, that is the $20 gold piece, the $10 gold piece, and the $5 gold piece, are not these exact proportions, exact fractions of a troy ounce, they are very close. And if you have to use a calculator to figure out what the gold is for these, then using a calculator to figure out what the gold value is for these is really not that big of a deal. But let's just take some examples. The full ounce versus the $20 gold piece. And I have talked about these. In fact, I'll put a video down below because we talk about the differences, the similarities and the differences between these, the modern American Gold Eagles, and these, the Pre-33 $20 gold piece, Saint-Gaudens piece. But the fact of the matter is that while this is 1 troy ounce of pure gold, the actual gold weight, remember we talked about that earlier, of the $20 gold piece, 0.9675. So 0.96 or 96.75% of a troy ounce is really, really close to a full troy ounce. It's not exact, but again, if you're going to have to use a calculator to figure out how much your gold coins are worth if they're not a full troy ounce anyway, then multiplying it by the actual gold weight, that's a slight difference from a troy ounce, is honestly not that big of a deal. Here we have the 1/2 gold eagle and the one $10 gold piece of the Pre-33 style. So this is the Indian style. The difference, this is exactly 0.5 of a troy ounce. This is exactly 0.4837 of a troy ounce. You can see just how close it is. And for me, I don't mind having exact amounts, but if I can just kind of keep in my head, if I can look at this and say, this is roughly 2 troy ounces of gold, this is roughly 1 troy ounce of gold at 0.48375 each, that's close enough for me. I've got spreadsheets where I have all of this figured out exactly, but when you're just looking at it, when you're just laying it on the table, to say that a $20 gold piece is very close to a troy ounce, that's fine for me. Again, we'll keep on talking about some of these weights. The $5 gold piece compared to the 1/4 troy ounce gold piece. The 1/4 troy ounce, 0.242, or the $5 gold piece, 0.242 versus 0.25, right? So they are incredibly close in terms of their actual gold weight, 0.25, 0.242. Very, very similar. So even though the Pre-33 pieces weren't intentionally made to be troy ounces and fractions of a troy ounce, they are quite close. I should mention now, we talked about some of the other denominations that were made out of gold, and there are probably some people asking, why aren't you including the $2.50 gold piece, which just happens to be very close to 1/10 of a troy ounce? It's because these pieces tend to have a lot of numismatic value. I have them, I stack them, I think they're very nice, but also the $2.50 Indian in particular, and to some extent the $5 Indian, are a very heavily counterfeited series. These were made in abundance in the 1940s and 1950s overseas, so that Americans could kind of get them back into the country. For that reason, I've actually released a series of videos talking about counterfeit gold coins. I'm not trying to frighten you. It's a good idea to understand that these pieces are out there. There are counterfeits of every series. I guarantee you there are counterfeits of the Britannia and the Libertad and the Philharmonic and the American Gold Eagle. So it's a good idea to always kind of be aware of that anyway. But the $2.50 series, whether it's the Indian series or the Liberty series, I am particularly cautious with each one of the dates of the $2.50 gold Indian series. Each one of the dates, each one of the mint marks for this entire series appear on NGC's 50 most counterfeited American coins. So you can see that there are tons of counterfeits out there. For that reason, I strongly suggest, especially if you are new to this, let's just go with the $5, $10, and $20 gold pieces. We'll talk about these again in just a minute. So you know that the weights are quite similar. And if you're already having to use a calculator to figure out how much your quarter ounce of gold is worth, then what's the difference of using a calculator to figure out what the $5 gold piece or the $10 gold piece is worth in terms of its actual gold weight? These websites that show the actual gold weights are very easy to access. You can access them with your cell phone. You can access them with your desktop. They are always available. They are very easy to understand. So don't let the weights get you off course either. We talked about the purities. We've talked about the weights. They are both surmountable objects. This is not rocket science. How about collectability? This is one of the reasons why I love Pre-33. And I've talked about this concept over and over again on my channel, depending on what it is that we're talking about, with vintage silver bars versus modern silver bars, with Pre-33 gold versus modern American or other gold coins. The fact of the matter is that the United States Mint and every other mint around the world that puts out these bullion coins cranks them out nonstop, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They will make millions of them over the last couple of years, and they will make millions of them over the next coming years. So the idea that this is an ever-increasing supply, modern bullion pieces will continue to be made in huge numbers, while all of the Pre-33 pieces continue to have a shrinking supply. And I think that makes these pieces fascinating. It's not just the history involved, the fact that people would have used these for major purchases of their lives. It's the fact that this is a contracting supply. And right now, as I'm filming, especially over the last 12 to 24 months, we know for a fact that Pre-33 gold has been melted in shockingly large numbers. So the idea that modern pieces continue to be made in the millions while these pieces continue to be melted and their populations continue to get smaller, I think that makes these a fascinating alternative to the modern gold bullion pieces. But the truth is that if you don't like that collectability, you don't have to look for the especially rare pieces. You can find better dates and better mint marks. If you don't understand that, we'll talk about those in just a second too. And those pieces may have some potential to increase numismatically, but you can really avoid most of that by going with the most common pieces that are out there. I think that makes these pieces not just interesting historically, but also maybe a little bit affordable. The truth is that these Pre-33 pieces have lost so much of their premiums, the amounts that they used to sell for over their gold content, as more and more people are trying to buy modern gold bullion, that these pieces are starting to look really, really interesting from that perspective as well. So we talked about purity, we talked about weight, we talked about collectability of Pre-33. How about advantages? I talked a little bit about pricing. It seems like right now, at least, the premiums on Pre-33 are quite low. We talked a little bit about the collectability. The fact that we have this ever decreasing supply should make these pieces continue to hold their values over time. I love that about Pre-33. They're cool. There is simply no denying that a piece like Saint-Gaudens' $10 gold piece is a stunningly beautiful gold coin. This is so much fun, and a lot of people would rather have these vintage pieces than a modern bullion piece. So much so that many modern bullion pieces are actually based on the designs that were used in the past. We know that to be true of the $20 Saint-Gaudens, just like it is with the entire American Gold Eagle set. The United States of America also has a 3/9, technically a 4/9 fine gold bullion program called the Gold Buffalo. Those are based off of Fraser's 1913 Buffalo nickel design. So these pieces, beautiful, and a lot of gold coins around the world are kind of throwbacks to this period of time anyway. Why wouldn't you just go ahead and buy the original rather than buying something that just uses that design? I think that they are very, very cool. Are there disadvantages to buying these? There are disadvantages. We've talked about most of them. They are not as pure. They are not the exact 1 troy ounce and fractions of a troy ounce increments. But again, you're already dealing with fractions. There's not that big of a deal with dealing with different purities and weights. It's really a pretty simple procedure once you get used to looking it up. They're maybe not quite as universal. The American Gold Eagles are very popular around the world, just like the Canadian Maples are very popular around the world, and the Philharmonics are popular in much of Europe, if not all around the world. So the Pre-33 American gold coin does tend to be a little bit more geographically specific, right? You're probably just going to be interested in these pieces if you're in America. There are people around the world who like these pieces in the same way that I stack pieces from other countries from their period of time when they made circulating gold coins. But it is a little bit more geographic specific. But when's the next time you're going to be selling gold in Istanbul or Beijing? If these aren't places that you're going to be taking your gold to sell them, then I don't really feel like that's much of a disadvantage. Your dealers may try to indicate when you go to sell these pieces that because they are not 3/9 fine, they can't move them as quickly. In my experience, while that is true, those are the same kind of dealers who are going to say that they don't want to pay you a premium for the modern gold bullion coins because they don't have a collector base. There's always going to be some way that a dealer tries to chisel you in price a little bit. So, if you want to just lump that all together and understand that the dealer's always going to try to get the best price that they possibly can. I've never had a bad experience trying to sell these pieces unless they are a very valuable numismatic item, and that goes into discussions and negotiations about pricing anyway. Suggestions. If you do feel like you want to pursue Pre-33 gold, what do I suggest? Don't dump a bunch of money into it all at once. Get used to this over time. I'm a big fan of slow and steady, and I am a huge fan, in particular, of the $5 Liberty series. These are very rarely counterfeited, and they were made in such huge numbers, and they continue to exist to this day. And these are an affordable option. We said before that these are right about 1/4 of a troy ounce, so you know that you're not going to have to sink a bunch of money into them in the first place. Some of the other designs may excite you a little bit more, and there's nothing wrong with that. I'm a big fan of trying to track down those pieces whose aesthetic really gets you going, but the $5 Liberty is probably the easiest thing to dip your toes into if you're considering Pre-33. I would stick with the 5, the 10, and the $20 gold piece, even if it's in the Indian series. The Liberty series is probably a little bit easier, and that's because those $2.50 gold pieces do have such high numismatic premiums, and there's always that potential for counterfeits. So I would probably stick with a 5, the 10, and the $20 gold piece. That's a great place to start. It will cover all of your bases, and then if you decide that this is a field that you like, you can sink much, much deeper into this area also, right? I would probably stick with slabbed pieces. Those are the pieces that are in holders by NGC, PCGS, or CACG. In the case of modern 20th century, the 20th century Pre-33 pieces, I don't mind using a third-party grader like Annex. I don't typically use Annex. I would consider them to be a little bit less than PCGS, NGC, or CACG, but they are very good at determining authenticity and grade for pre-33 gold pieces, so I would be okay with those. I would stick with slabbed pieces as you start out in this area. It's going to cover a lot of the kind of difficulties when you first get into this. This is going to smooth them out and make this much easier for you. So I would go with the slabbed pieces. Pro tip, try to get the slab pieces without paying an extra premium for them. Many dealers will treat a slabbed piece like a pre-33 gold $5 piece, the same way that they would a raw pre-33 gold piece without any extra value, without any extra cost. If that's the case, definitely pick up the slab pieces first. That's definitely the way to go. The lower grades are good, but don't get caught up in the lowest grades. A lot of these pieces that you see before you, or pieces that are in my stack at least, are in the MS grade level. That would be grades on the Sheldon grading scale between 60 and 70. I would avoid the 61s and 62s. You don't see 60s very often. 63 is ideal. 65 is fantastic. If you can find a 65 and not have to pay extra for it, that's great. But don't sleep on the idea of the AU58 pieces, especially if they already come slabbed in a piece by a third-party grader. These pieces have a little bit of honest wear to them. And honestly, when you're talking about those lower grades mint state pieces, the 60, the 61, for example, they tend to have a lot of bag marks and a lot of contact marks. I would much rather have just a nice, honestly worn AU58 than something that's just been beat to heck, but is still technically uncirculated. So the pro tip there is to look for those 58s, especially if you can negotiate them down, because they're not fully mint state, right? If you must go raw, if you're not going to buy pieces in slabs, and again, I strongly recommend slab pieces when you're first starting out, go with the $5 Liberties. Those are, again, very abundant. They weren't counterfeited nearly as often. And when I say counterfeit, for the most part with the pre-33 pieces, even the counterfeits are going to be real gold. But it does have you, you do come into issues when you go to sell these pieces if they're counterfeit. So if you're going to go with the raw, non-graded pieces, again, with the $5 Liberties, they are pretty easy to grade. You can get used to them very easily, and they are incredibly abundant. So that would probably be the only one that I would really go uncertified when you're first starting out in this area. Remember that there are lots of other pieces if you do decide to get deeper into this, not just the $2.50 gold pieces, but the $1 gold pieces and the $3. And maybe if your wallet is really, really fat, you can go for those $4 gold pieces. They'll run you a couple $100,000. But these pieces can be quite affordable. So if this is something you like, feel free to dig deeper into it and go for those slightly unusual amounts, those less often seen pieces, the pieces that really aren't part of traditional pre-33 gold stacking. And then keep in mind that there are counterfeits everywhere. So just the fact that there are some counterfeits of these should not dissuade you from buying them, because again, there are counterfeits of everything out there. Keep your wits about you. Make sure these pieces are being looked at by a reputable dealer. If you're not buying them online, try to use the Sigma just to make sure that they are the proper gold. That's another reason to look for these pieces and certified pieces and slabs, because you will avoid a lot of that. And if you're interested, go ahead and check out the 3-part video series down below about counterfeit gold coins. It's not just about American pieces, but it is a fascinating look at why some of these pieces were counterfeited and why they're still made out of real gold most of the time. So the idea of pre-33, it's as simple as gold coins made before 1933 when we used to circulate gold coins, but you can see there is so much more to it, and that makes it exciting. This is a fun thing to stack. If you have questions about anything we talked about here, or any of the pieces that you see before you, definitely go ahead and leave that question down below. You guys know that I'm fond of saying if you've got a question, there's a good chance somebody else has that question. Maybe they're just afraid to ask. Let's see if we can answer it for everybody. No such thing as a bad question on my channel. If you are new to this, once again, I'd love to have you click on that subscription button, but also hit the notification bell, because I air brand new videos every Friday, and I'm usually there to talk about them while they are playing for us all for the very first time. But immediately after these premieres, we often go live with a live stream. This is an opportunity to talk about what we just talked about in the video, but also we open the floor up to anything coin and bullion related. These Live streams are very high energy. They are a blast, a great way to have discussions with me, to make comments, to ask questions, to talk with other people who are in the stacking community. I really look forward to those live streams. If you're watching this video with me for the first time on a Friday, stick around for the live stream afterwards. I guarantee you're going to have a blast. So definitely check those live streams. I like to end my videos by saying always be learning. And thank you for allowing me to be a part of your journey as we go deeper into the world of coins and physical precious metals.